America is full of abandoned and forgotten locations. In many cases, some of the most interesting and mysterious of these places can be the schools. Although it would be impossible for any one person to ever visit all of them, today's list will include the top 8 abandoned schools located in Texas and Louisiana. Number 8. Overgrown School Ruins at West Point, Texas. These are the remains of a now abandoned school that was established in 1887 and abandoned in 1944. It's part of an old ghost town known as West Point, Texas. This town was first established in the 1880s, when the arrival of the railroad encouraged settlers to begin moving into the area. A post office was built in 1894, and soon West Point contained most businesses that would be considered essential for a town, including 2 doctors, 3 hotels, and a cannery. However, despite this initial growth, the subsequent construction of Highway 71 1 mile south of the railroad tracks caused a sizable portion of the populace to relocate closer to the highway. West Point now has a population of roughly 200, and the old town includes many abandoned, decaying, and overgrown ruins, such as the school we see here. Number 7. Old Mosheim School at Mosheim, Texas. This collapsing structure at Mosheim, Texas is all that's left of the old Mosheim School. The school was initially completed in 1930. Around the time of the Great Depression. It would have been considered a grand building for being located in such a small town of only about 50 people, and it included 7 classrooms, a study hall, an auditorium, a library, a book depository, lavatories, and a superintendent's office. Its purpose was to accommodate the future growth of the local community, a growth that never really ended up materializing. Although Mosheim's population did gradually grow to about 200 in 1941, it failed to grow any further and actually began to decline after a few decades. Eventually, the school was forced to close due to a lack of attendance and funding. By the 1970s, the building lay completely abandoned, and time has not treated it kindly. Number 6. The Kang School at Ghost Town of Catarina, Texas. The next school is located in the midst of Catarina, Texas, a forgotten ghost town that has been taken over by the wild. The name of Catarina has been associated with the region since at least 1778. Legend holds that it's the name of a Mexican woman killed by Indians in the area. By 1910, there was a small community at the location. Soon, a bunkhouse, a commissary, a hotel, a post office, and yes, this now abandoned schoolhouse were built. However, short supplies of water, marketing problems, and the Great Depression all took a toll on the town. By 1931, the population had dropped to 592, and many of its businesses had been forced to close. By 1990, the population had dropped down even further, to 45. Its once large and proud schoolhouse has fallen to ruin, and is now a comfortable, welcoming home to snakes, vultures, and insects. Number 5. Abandoned School of Pine Valley at Ida, Louisiana. This forgotten school complex is crumbling away in the middle of the Louisiana forest. Pine Valley School, as it's known, was built and opened for African American students in 1920. The first building for Pine Valley School was built as a 4-room building with 2 teachers teaching grades 1 through 12. It was expanded into a 4-room school building in 1922. In 1951, school officials started making plans to build a new school building in a different location, as this old Pine Valley School building was too overcrowded and could not accommodate the growth of the student population. By 1988, the school was abandoned, and it's now falling completely apart. The place where children once played, socialized, and learned is now covered in moss, vines, and shrubs, which grow peacefully all over the inside of these abandoned buildings. Number 4. The forgotten Toyah High School at Toyah, Texas. This ominous crumbling structure is part of a ghost town that is gradually fading into ruin in the middle of the western Texas desert. The town's known as Toyah, Texas. Deserted and defeated, it's now being consumed by the elements, but it didn't give up without a fight. The town was founded in 1879 by a man named W.T. Youngblood. By 1910, the town reached its peak population of 1,052 and had 4 churches, 4 stores, 2 banks, 2 hotels, 2 lumber yards, and a drugstore. In 1912, a large brick school building, the one featured in this video, was constructed. This structure served as both an elementary and a high school. However, with the start of the Great Depression, the town's population rapidly began to decline. By 1950, Toyah's population dropped to 409, and by 1980 it had decreased to just 165. Over the years, floods and high winds have taken a toll on many of the town's buildings, and in April 2004, a storm delivered 8 inches of rain in about 2 hours. The dike that had been built to protect the town gave way due to the volume of water, flooding nearly every building in town. The town and its school fought hard to stay alive, but in the end, this is a battle in which the Texas desert has come off victorious. Number 3. Crumbling George Washington Carver School at Shreveport, Louisiana. There aren't many abandoned places in Louisiana that are more ominous and sinister than the remains of this abandoned school. Welcome to the forgotten George Washington Carver School, also known as Satan's School, due to the dark legends and rumors associated with this place. Towards the end of the 1950s, as segregation was dwindling down, a new school for the local black children was needed. In 1957, the George Washington Carver Primary School was built on the outskirts of Shreveport, near the end of a long and winding Ellerby Road. As segregation came to an end, the school board made numerous attempts at consolidating the school, mixing the population by bringing in more white students. By the 1970s, a declining student population and more academics had sent the school into an irreversible downward spiral. In 1973, the George Washington Carver School would shut its doors for good. For several years after its closure, the school stood vacant while local and state officials debated on what to do with the property. Then in 1981, the Baptist Tabernacle leased the property for use as a campus of Baptist Christian College. However, due to low attendance and high maintenance costs, the site once again closed in 1985. The building and grounds have remained vacant ever since, becoming the subject of countless sinister rumors, stories, and urban legends. Number 2. The Mary Allen Seminary at Crockett, Texas. This grand structure may be on the verge of collapsing now, but its past history is remarkable. The Mary Allen Seminary, later known as the Mary Allen Junior College, was the first black women's college in the state of Texas. The school was founded in Crockett, Texas in 1886 by the Presbyterian pastor, Reverend Richard Allen, and his wife, Mary Allen. At the time, it was the first and only school that was open to the nearly 200,000 freed black women in the state. By the end of its first year, the school had 46 students, and the school was experiencing a steady growth. By 1891, the campus consisted of 260 acres of land and an additional brick hall. In 1933, the school changed its name to Mary Allen Junior College and became a coeducational institution. The school was closed in 1943 after a failed proposal to transform it into a black state college. In 1944, it was reopened by the National Missionary Baptist Convention of America and remained in operation until 1972. It now sits abandoned and forgotten in a state of decay. However, although the actual physical building may be fading into oblivion, its legacy and accomplishments live on, and they have helped to shape the society that we live in today. Number 1. The infamous Woodmen's Circle Home at Sherman, Texas. Does an orphanage count as a type of school? How about a religious retreat for members of a religious group? In any case, the Woodmen's Circle Home has served as both at one point or another. It's located in the town of Sherman, Texas, about 65 miles north of Dallas. This now abandoned red brick mansion was initially built in the 1920s, and it was run by a fraternal organization as an orphanage and dormitory for widowed women. In the more than 40 years that it operated, it was home to 100 children and 165 women. The organization abandoned the compound in the 1970s, and it changed hands a number of times after that. After the orphanage shut down, Ariel Ben Sherman, the spiritual leader of a suspected cult group, used the building as a commune. He was charged with child abuse and neglect after a 15-year-old girl in his congregation died from cancer. Sherman and the girl's mother, who was also charged, refused medical help for a basketball-sized tumor on the girl's shoulder. Now, the grandeur of the Georgian-style architecture of this place has given way to decay, and the entire abandoned complex, which once housed so many memories, tragedies, and secrets, is slowly crumbling into oblivion. Thank you for exploring these amazing places with me. As a reminder, if you enjoyed my video, please feel free to like it, subscribe to my channel, and to click on the notification bell so you can be informed whenever I produce a new video. Keep in mind that these are not all of the abandoned schools that are found in Texas and Louisiana, just my favorite 8, based on whether they're truly abandoned, how old they are, the history behind them, accessibility, and their current condition. Do you feel like I missed something? Please feel free to comment below the video. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on my next adventure.